Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There by Lewis Carroll. Child of the pure, unclouded brow and dreaming eyes of wonder, through time be fleet, and I thon, are half a life asunder. Thy loving smile will surely hail the life gift of a fairy tale. I have not seen thy sunny face, nor heard thy silver laughter. No thought of me shall find a place in thy life's hereafter. Enough of that now, and thou wilt not fail to listen to my fairy tale. A tale begun in other days when summer suns were glowing, a simple chime that served to time the rhythm of our rowing, whose echoes live in memory yet through envious years that say, I shall not forget. Come, hearken then, ere a voice of dread with bitter tidings laden shall summon to an unwelcome bed a melancholy maiden. We are but older children dear, who fret to find our bedtime near. Without the first frost of blinding snow, the storm's moody madness, within the firelight's ruddy glow, a childhood's nest of gladness, the magic word shall hold thy fast. Through thou shalt not heed thy raving blast, and through the shadow of a sigh may tremble through thy story. For happy summer days gone by, and vanished the summer glory, it shall not touch the breath of bale, the pleasure of our fairy tale. This is chapter 1, The Looking Glass House. One thing was certain, that the white kitten had had nothing to do with it. It was the black kitten's fault entirely, for the white kitten, having had its face washed by the old cat for the last quarter hour, and bearing it pretty well considering. So you see that it couldn't have had any hand in the mischief. The way Dinah washed her children's faces was this. First she held the poor thing down by its ear with one paw, and then the other paw she rubbed its face all over, the wrong way, beginning at the nose. And just now, as I said, she was hard at work on the white kitten, and who was lying quite still and trying to purr, no doubt feeling it was all meant for its good. But the black kitten had been finished with it earlier in the afternoon, and so while Alice was sitting curled up in a corner of a great armchair, half talking to herself and half asleep, the kitten had been having a grand game of romps with the ball of worsted that Alice had tried tying to wind up, and had been rolling it up and down until it had come undone again. And there it was, spread all over the hearthrug, all knots and tangles, with the kitten running after its own tail in the middle. Oh, you wicked little thing, cried Alice, catching the kitten and giving it a little kiss as she made it understand that it was in disgrace. Really, Dinah, you ought to have taught your children better manners. You ought, Dinah. You know you ought to have. And she added quite reproachfully at the old cat, speaking in a cross voice as best as she could manage. And then she scrambled back into the armchair, taking the kitten and the worsted with her, and began winding up the ball again. But didn't get very fast, and was talking all the time. Sometimes the kitten, sometimes to herself. Kitty sat there demurely on her knee, pretending to watch the progress of the winding, and now and then putting out one paw and gently touching the ball as if it would be glad to help if it might. Do you know what tomorrow is, Kitty? Alice began. You'd have guessed if you'd been at the window with me. Only Dinah was making up tidy, but so you couldn't. I was watching the boys getting in the sticks ready for the bonfire. There's plenty of sticks, Kitty. Only it got so cold and it snowed so that they had to leave off. Never mind, Kitty. We'll go out and see the bonfire tomorrow. Here Alice wound 2 or 3 more turns of the worsted round the kitten's neck, just to see how it would look, and this led to a scramble in which the ball rolled down onto the floor and yards got unwound again. Do you know, I was so angry, Kitty, Alice went on as soon as they were comfortably settled again, when I saw all the mischief you had been doing. I was very nearly opening the window and putting you out into the snow. And you have deserved it, you little mischievous darling. What have you got to say for yourself? Now, don't interrupt me, she went on, holding up one finger. I'm going to tell you all your faults. Number 1, you squeaked twice while Dinah was washing your face this morning. Now, you can't deny it, Kitty. I heard you. And what's that you say? Pretending that the kitten was speaking. Her paw went into your eye. Well, that's your own fault for you keeping your eyes open. If you'd shut them up tight, it wouldn't have happened. Now, don't make up any more excuses, but listen. Number 2, you pulled up a snowdrop away from you pulled Snowdrop away by the tail just as You'd put down a saucer of milk before her. What, you were thirsty, were you? How do you know she wasn't thirsty too? And now, for number 3, you unwound every bit of the worsted while I wasn't looking. That's 3 faults, Kitty, and you've not been punished for any of them yet. I'm saving up all your punishments for Wednesday week. Suppose I had saved them up all my punishments, she went on, talking more and more to herself. What would they have done at the end of the year? I should have gone to prison, I suppose, when the day came. Or let me see, suppose each punishment was going without dinner. Then when that miserable day came, I should have to go without 50 dinners at once. Well, I shouldn't mind that much. I'd have far rather go without them than eat them. Do you hear the snow against the window panes, Kitty? How nice and soft it sounds. Just as if someone was kissing the window all over outside. I wonder if the snow loves the trees and the fields and that it kisses them so gently. And then it covers them up snug, like a white quilt. Or perhaps it says, "Go to sleep, darlings, till the summer comes again." And then they wake up in the summer, Kitty, and they dress themselves all in green and dance about. Whenever the wind blows. Oh, that's very pretty, cried Alice, dropping the ball of worsted to clap her hands. And I do wish it was true. I'm sure the woods look sleepy in the autumn and when the leaves are getting brown. Kitty, can't you play chess? Now, don't smile, my dear. I'm asking it seriously, because we were playing just now and you watched just as if you understood it. And when I said check, you purred. Well, it was not a nice check, Kitty. And really, I might have won if it hadn't been for that nasty knight that came wriggling down among my pieces. Kitty, dear, let's pretend. And here I wish I could tell you half the things Alice used to say, beginning with her favorite phrase, let's pretend. She'd had quite a long argument with her sister only the day before, all because Alice had begun with, let's pretend we're kings and queens. And her sister, who liked to be exact, had argued they couldn't because there were only 2 of them. And Alice had been reduced at last to say, well, you can be one of them and I'll be the rest. At, and at once she had really frightened her old nurse by shouting suddenly in her ear, Nurse, do let's pretend that I'm a hungry hyena and you're a bone. But this was taking us away from Alice's speech to the kitten. Let's pretend that you're the Red Queen, Kitty. Do you know what I think of you? I think if you sat up and folded your arms, you'd look exactly like her. Now try to do it. There's a dear. And Alice got the Red Queen off the table and set it up before the kitten as a model for it to imitate. However, the thing didn't succeed, principally because, as Alice said to it, because the kitten wouldn't fold its arms properly. So to punish it, she held up the looking glass that it might see how sulky it was. And if you're not good directly, she added, I'll put you through into the looking glass house. How would you like that? Now, if only you attend, Kitty, and talk so much, I'll tell you that all my ideas about the looking glass house. First, there's a room that you can see through the glass. That's just the same as our drawing room, only things go on the other way. I can see all of it just now when I get up upon a chair, all but the bit just behind the fireplace. Oh, I do wish I could see that bit. I want to know so much whether you've got fire in the winter. You can never tell, unless our fire smokes. Then smoke comes up into the room too. But that may be only a pretense, just to make it look as if they had a fire. Well, then the books are something like our books, only the words would go wrong way. And that I know that because I've held one of our books up to the glass, and then they hold back up in the other room. How would you like to live in the looking glass house, Kitty? I wonder if they'd give you milk there. Perhaps looking glass milk isn't good to drink. But oh, Kitty, now we can come to the passage. You can just see a little peep at the passage of the looking glass house if you leave the door of our drawing room wide open. And that's very like our passage as far as you can see, only that, it might be quite different on beyond. Oh, Kitty, how nice it would be if we could only get through into the looking glass house. I'm sure it's got, such beautiful things in it. Let's pretend there's a way of getting through it somehow. Let's pretend the glass has got all soft like gauze so that we can get through. Why, it's turning into a sort of mist now, I declare. It'll be easy enough to get through. And she was up into the chimney piece while she said this, and though she hardly knew she had got there, and certainly the glass was beginning to melt away, just like a bright silvery mist. In another moment, Alice was through the glass and had jumped lightly down into the looking-glass room. The very first thing she did was to look whether there was a fire in the fireplace, and she was quite pleased to find that there was a real one, blazing as brightly as she had left behind. So I shall be as warm here as I was in the old room, thought Alice. Warmer, in fact, because there'll be no one here to scold me away from the fire. Oh, what fun it'll be when they see me through the glass here and can't get to me. Then she began to look about and noticed that what could be seen from the old room was quite common and uninteresting, but all the rest was as different as possible. For instance, all the pictures on the wall next to the fire seemed to be alive, and the very clock on the chimney piece, you can only see the back of it in the glass house, has got a face of a little old man, and he grinned at her. They don't keep this room so tidy as the other, Alice thought to herself, as she noticed several chessmen down on the hearth among the cinders. But another moment, with a little of surprise, she went down on her hands and knees and was watching them. The chessmen were walking about, two and two. Here are the Red King and the Red Queen, Alice said in a whisper, of fear of frightening them. And they were the White King and the White Queen sitting on the edge of the shovel. And here are two castles walking arm in arm. I don't think they can hear me, she went on, as she put her head closer down, and I'm nearly sure they can't see me. I feel somehow as if I were invisible. Here something began squeaking on the table behind Alice, and to turn her head just in time to see one of the white pawns roll over and begin kicking. She watched it, and with great curiosity to see what happened next. It is the voice of my child, the White Queen cried out as she rushed past the king, so violently that she knocked him over among the cinders. My precious Lily, my imperial kitten, she began, scrambling wildly up the side of the fender. Imperial fiddlesticks, said the king, rubbing his nose, which had been hurt by the fall. He was right to be a little annoyed with the queen, for he had covered with ashes from head to foot. Alice was very anxious to be of use, and as poor Lily was nearly screaming herself into a fit, she hastily picked up the queen and set her on the table beside her noisy little daughter. The queen gasped and sat down. The rapid journey through the air had been quite taken her out of breath, and for a minute or two she could do nothing but hug the little Lily in silence. And soon she had recovered her breath a little, and she called out to the White King, who was sitting, uh, whoops, she could do nothing but the queen gasped and sat down. The rapid journey through the air had quite taken away her breath, and for a minute or two she could do nothing but hug the little Lily in silence. And as soon as she recovered her breath a little, she called out to the White King, who was sitting sulkily among the ashes, "Mind the volcano!" "What volcano?" said the king, looking up anxiously into the fire as if he thought it might be the most likely place to find one. "It blew me up," panted the queen, who was still a little out of breath. "Mind you come up the regular way. Don't get blown up." Alice watched the White King as he slowly struggled from bar to bar until at last he said, "Why, you'll be hours and hours getting to the table at that rate. I'd better help him, hadn't I?" But the king took no notice of the question, and it was quite clear he could neither hear nor see her. So Alice picked him up very gently and lifted him across more slowly than she had lifted the queen, and she might not take his breath away. But before she put him on the table, she thought she might dust him a little, for he was covered in ashes. Soon afterwards, she had never seen in all her life such a face as the king made when he found himself held in the air by an invisible hand and being dusted. He was far too much astonished to cry out, but his eyes and his mouth went getting larger and larger and rounder, till her hand shook so much with laughing that she nearly let him drop on the floor. "Oh, please don't make such faces, my dear," she cried out, quite forgetting that the king couldn't hear her. "You make me laugh so that I can hardly hold you. And don't keep your mouth open so wide. All the ashes will get into it. And there, now I think you're quite tidy enough," she added, and she smoothed his hair and set him upon the table near the queen. The king immediately fell flat on his back and lay perfectly still, and Alice was a little alarmed at what she had done, and she went round the room to see if she could find any water to throw over him. However, she could find nothing but a bottle of ink, and when she got back with it she found he had recovered, and he and the queen were talking together in a frightened whisper, so low that Alice could hardly hear what they were saying. The king said, "I assure you very much, my dear, I turned cold to the very ends of my whiskers." To which the queen replied, "You haven't got any whiskers." "The horror of that moment," the king went on, "I shall never, never forget it." "You will, though," said the queen, "if you don't make a memorandum of it." Alice looked on with great interest as the king took an enormous memorandum book out of his pocket and began writing. A sudden thought struck her, and she took hold of the end of the pencil which came some way over his shoulder and began writing for him. The poor king looked puzzled and unhappy, and struggled with the pencil for some time without saying anything. But Alice was too strong for him, and at last he panted out, "My dear, I really must get a thinner pencil. I can't manage this one bit. It writes in all manner of things that I don't intend." "What manner of things?" said the Queen, looking over the book Alice had put "The White Knight is sliding down the poker. He balances very badly." "That's not a memorandum of your feelings." There was a book lying near Alice on the table while she sat writing The White King, for she was a little anxious about him and had the ink all ready to throw over him in case he fainted again. And she turned over the leaves to find some part which she read. "For it's in some language I don't know," she said to herself. "It was like—" and the writing looks backwards. She puzzled over this for some time, but at last a bright thought struck her. "Why, it's a looking-glass book, of course. If I go and hold it to the glass, the words will all come the right way again." And this was the poem that Alice read. Jabberwocky. "'Twas brillig and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy where the borrow grows, and the moan rafts outgrabe. Beware of the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the Firmius Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the maxim foe he sought. So he rested by the Tumtum tree, and stood awhile in thought. And in uffish thought he stood. The Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack, and he left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. "And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous Callooh, Callay," he chortled in his joy. "'Twas brillig in the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy where the borrow grows, and the moan rafts outgrabe." "It seems very pretty," she said when she had finished it, "but rather hard to understand." You see, she didn't like to confess, even to herself, that she couldn't make it out at all. "Somehow it seems to fill my head with ideas, only I don't exactly know what they are. However, somebody killed something, that's clear, at any rate. But oh," thought Alice, suddenly jumping up, "if I don't make haste, I shall have to go back through the looking-glass before I've seen what the rest of the house is like. Let's have a look at the garden first." And she was out of the room in a moment. She ran down the stairs, or at least it wasn't exactly running, but a new invention for getting herself downstairs quickly and easily, as Alice had said to herself. She just kept the tips of her fingers on the handrail and floated gently down without even touching the stairs with her feet. Then she floated through the hall and would have gone straight out the door in the same way. She had not caught hold of a doorpost. She was getting a little giddy with so much floating in the air, and was rather glad to find herself walking again in the natural way.